Now settle in and let me tell you about Olenka. Everyone in her little town called her by a pet name, Olenka, the darling. And you'd understand why the moment you laid eyes on her. She had soft, round cheeks, always a little flushed, kind eyes that made you feel, somehow, that she was already fond of you. When she walked down the lane, men tipped their hats and smiled longer than necessary, and women felt oddly warmed by her presence. Too, she lived in a small house with a garden in a quiet corner of the town, and her father had recently passed, leaving her with the house and a gentle, floating sort of loneliness. She wasn't unhappy exactly. She was simply waiting, though she didn't know it. Waiting the way a lamp waits to be lit. Olenka, you see, was not quite herself when she was alone. She needed someone to love. That was simply the shape of her. And love, when it came quickly. The first to light her up was Kukin, Ivan Petrovich Kukin, who managed the open-air theater next door and was forever in a state of theatrical despair. He'd lean over the fence in the evenings and complain to Olenka about the rain, about the audiences, about how nobody in this town truly appreciated art. And Olenka listened. Oh, how she listened. She looked at him with those soft, devoted eyes and felt every one of his grievances as her own. Before long, she was repeating his very words to the neighbors. The theater, she'd say gravely, is the most important thing in life. The public doesn't understand it, but what can you do? Kukin married her in winter, and Olenka bloomed. She managed the box office, kept the accounts, scolded the stagehands. At night, she told him he was the most gifted man in the province, and she believed it completely. She became the theater. She became Kukin, and she was, in her way, entirely happy. Then one spring morning, a telegram arrived. Kukin had gone to Moscow for the season, and now he was dead. Just like that. Olenka wept for 3 weeks. She wore black, she spoke to no one, and the house felt cold and purposeless, like a stage with all the lights put out. But grief has its own seasons, and life in a small town keeps moving whether you do or not. By autumn, a new figure walked beside her after church. Vasily Andreevich Pustovalov, a quiet, steady man who dealt in timber. He had a calm face and sensible opinions, and within the year, they were married. Olenka changed as naturally as a river changes course. The theater was gone from her tongue. Now she spoke of timber, of lumber prices and dry wood and the pine forests out past the river road. She wore a practical expression and talked to customers with confidence. Timber, she would explain, is a serious business. Pustovalov would nod, and Olenka felt the deep satisfaction of being exactly right about the world. They were happy together for 6 years. 6 quiet, orderly, timber-scented years. Then Pustovalov went out without his hat in the cold one December, caught a chill, and was gone within 4 months. Olenka was devastated in a way that went deeper than tears. She wore black again, and this time it seemed to suit her more permanently. The house fell silent. She gave up the timber business. She sat in her garden in the evenings and stared at nothing in particular. Neighbors would stop and ask how she was, and she would say, with quiet bewilderment, "I don't know. I don't know what to think about anything anymore." And she meant it. Without someone to love, without someone whose opinions she could carry inside her like a warm coal, Olenka had no opinions at all. She grew thin. she grew gray around the edges. Cats sat on her fence, and she didn't shoo them away. She simply existed, like a word waiting for a sentence to belong to. Dim and purposeless, and terribly, terribly alone. A veterinary surgeon named Smirnin eventually came to lodge in her wing of the house. A man with dark eyes, a troubled marriage somewhere far away, and a young son he rarely mentioned. Olenka brightened. Not all at once, but the way a sky brightens after a long, overcast morning. They talked in the evenings. He complained about the cattle plague spreading through the district, about the ignorance of farmers, about the sorry state of veterinary medicine in the provinces. And Olenka listened and nodded and absorbed. Soon she was explaining to anyone who would hear. The cattle plague is a dreadful thing, and the authorities simply do not take it seriously enough. People exchanged glances behind her back, but Olenka was alive again, and that was unmistakable. She and Smirnin were not married, but she loved him with her whole generous heart, and for a time, that seemed to be enough. Then his regiment was transferred. He left, and the warmth went out of her again, like a lamp extinguished again. Just like that, years passed. Olenka aged in her quiet house. The fence grew mossy. The garden went a little wild. She had no opinions about anything. Not the weather, not the neighbors, not the price of anything at all. She moved slowly and spoke softly and mostly kept to herself, like a book nobody opened anymore. Then one summer evening, Smirnin returned, with a wife, reconciled, and his young son, Sasha, who was 10 years old and needed a place to stay during the school term. They took the lodge, and Sasha, small and serious-faced, became the center of Olenka's universe before the summer was even out. She fed him, she fussed over him, she sat with him while he did his lessons, she listened when he explained his schoolwork, and she felt that she finally understood what mattered most in the world. Education. The proper education of children. She would tell the neighbors, examinations are such a strain on the young nerves. The school curriculum is far too heavy, and her eyes shone when she said it. One night, Olenka woke and heard Sasha moving about in the next room, restless, perhaps worried about a test. She lay in the dark with her hand on her heart, whispering small prayers for him, the way you'd pray for your own child. And there it was, that old familiar fullness, that sense of being completely necessary to the world. In the morning, she walked him to school and waved until she could no longer see him. Then she went home and sat by her window, warm and contented and full of opinions about mathematics homework. Now you might smile at Olenka. I'd understand it. There is something gently, tenderly absurd about a woman who can only see herself in the mirror of whoever she loves. But here's what I've always thought, sitting with this story by a quiet fire. There is also something quietly beautiful about a love as pure and unguarded as hers. She asked nothing for herself. She only wanted to give. Perhaps that is foolishness. Or perhaps it is the most human thing in all the world. I leave that question warmly with you.